Hi, and welcome to Manti's Book Club. Today we continue reading through Profession Witch. If you are watching this on Twitch, you can find previous episodes on my YouTube channel, acidmanticore. The record of this episode will be uploaded to my YouTube channel somewhere within a week, hopefully. So if this is the first stream that you see, you can safely pause it and go listen to the beginning of the book. We are nearing the end of it now. Or you can continue listening to this one, but it will be quite spoilery. We have probably 2 episodes left. Today we are starting with lecture 13. Herbal Science with Basics of Plant Growing. The crossing went without a hitch. Having waved farewell to those remaining on the other bank, Manko howled pitifully and tore at the strong belt reins secured round the tree. We went deeper into the forest. As the herbalist said, the terrain has noticeably dropped. The potholes from the horseshoes instantly filled with black water, and we had not yet approached the swamp itself. Leon, can I ask you one question? Of course, the vampire responded nonchalantly. Are you looking for power over death? Who told you? The vampire's complacency was blown away by the wind. Who cares? The fortune teller guessed. So, yes or no? Well, who cares? Leon snapped caustically. Well, no one in general, but do you think if I had that stone I could close the circle? I continued to randomly test the waters. No, snapped the clearly alarmed John. Do not even think about it. Okay, but what about someone else? For example, your fiancé? I will kill that damn troll. The vampire flared up, warming the stallion with a whip. Is she beautiful? I didn't lag behind. The rhythmic clatter of hooves became noticeably more frequent. Will you invite me to the wedding? I hope that after that little performance that Wal and I put on last year, I no longer have a fiancé. Leon muttered through his fangs. You're wrong. After that huge scandal we caused, you will never have a fiancé at all. Val laughed, sending his horse into a gallop. And why did all the fuss flare up? I asked eagerly. But Leon spurred Volt and literally ran away from the answer. Even a frightened hare would not have been able to catch up with a black stallion. We met at the edge of the swamp. The gone jump began at a sparse mixed forest, gradually turning into a stunted pine. Low crooked trees with the last of their strength stretched towards the sun. Pitiful scraps of pine needles on thin, crooked branches, scabby with lichen. Even these goners were flattered by someone. They tore off the bark in long strips and crushed the shoots. Goats graze here in the summer, Val explained, nodding at the gnawed trees. That's why they call the swamp goat jumps. The goat is cunning and jumpy. Jumps from hammock to hammock, where it plucks sedges, where it gnaws off a branch, and thus is fed. Many people keep goats here. You probably can't feed a cow like that. Cat needs grass, but the land here is crappy, swampy, only sage grows. Okay, let's look for a path. Why look for it? I can see it from here, said Leon, pointing to the east. Chick, look. That's the one, I confirmed, recognizing the withered stems of wolf's edge. Seems too flimsy, the troll winced. At least the horses... hopefully horses won't get scared. They can smell some kind of reptile. jump to the side, and well, and they're done. Leon, if we fall into a quagmire, who will you save first? I asked flirtatiously. Myself, the vampire answered shortly. And he is not joking, Val added. So dismount, chick, and if you want this ghoul to save you, take his wallet and bag. And how much should be in the wallet? I tried to turn the conversation into a joke, but Leon turned away, and the troll chuckled contemptuously. Dry, dark green moss covered the ground in a thick carpet. Even early frost didn't kill it. Despite the presence of a path, the boots sank to the middle of the top, and there below something squelched and slurped when I put my foot down and raised it. The horses were led by the bridle. The rings on Volt's elaborate harness jiggled. The vampire and Volt went first, followed by Val and Sivka. Chamomile and I completed the procession. After 10 minutes filled with guarded silence, it became unbearable for me. It seemed to me that a hearse was silently crawling behind us. Looking around, I noticed a black, low cloud quickly approaching from the west. The strong wind chilled me to the bone. Chamomile, girl, watch your step, I affectionately reminded the subdued filly who was looking around suspiciously. She had already stumbled several times on what seemed to be a level place and was trying to get ahead in order to squeeze between Volt and the troll's grey gelding. Even two horses wouldn't fit on the path side by side, but Chamomile didn't understand that. She was scared, like me. The smell of decay hung in the air. I convinced myself that the swamp was supposed to smell like that because it was essentially a huge rotten puddle, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else floating in that puddle. I don't like this, Leon said suddenly, looking over his shoulder with suspicion. What exactly? There is someone there, the vampire nodded back. A fog of a strange yellowish hue was thickening over the swamp. The smell of decomposition intensified. Do not scare me. I'm just warning you. With a trembling hand I drew a search symbol in the air. Leon, there is not a single living creature within a mile radius. Perhaps our ghoul sense spirits, Val inquired mockingly. Perhaps, the telepathist agreed. I didn't say this someone was alive. Well, then you can relax. There are as many spirits as you like here for every taste. Humans, elves, trolls, maybe even a vampire lying around. Just last year's, as many as 100 crossbowmen drowned and got jumps. They had some kind of training here, like field and swamp conditions training. They gathered near the swamp. Blue Trumpets hired a wanderer as a guide, apparently a blessed one because none of the villagers set foot in the swamp. Well, there is not much demand from a fool. He drowned himself, and well, it didn't end well for their guys. Are you by any chance a relative of that blessed one? As if by chance, Leon asked. What? Well, I do not think they liked us. Who? The spirits. I don't talk nonsense, the troll laughed. I love, value, and respect the dead, because this is a profitable business if you handle it correctly. No one has ever made a complaint against me. Then why would they start crawling out of the quagmire behind our backs? I don't like this, I said. That's where I started, the vampire reminded. Indeed, strange things were happening to the swamp. Here and there, openings appeared in the moss, from which emerged crooked arms and heads and rusty helmets. The valiant crossbowmen scrambled out of the quagmire and splashed towards the path. They would have looked much better if they had surfaced a year earlier. The acidic swamp water eroded their swollen faces beyond recognition. But, despite the grey-green color of their skin and cadaverous spots, the crossbowmen held up well, and it seemed were going to continue their swamp-filled exercises. "What do we do?" I inquired in a whisper. You're our expert on the undead," Val snapped. "Get your notes out." "I remember it without notes," I was offended. "There are two types of zombies, aggressive and indifferent. Aggressive ones are divided into 5 classes of danger, taking into account the lifetime status of the undead and the qualifications of the magician creator. Whether a zombie belongs to a particular species is determined visually and based on tests." "Well, invite them to fill out the form," the troll sarcastically advised. At that moment, the first bolt whistled between Sivka's ears. "Type A, 3rd class," I unmistakably determined. "On the horses," Leon commanded. I quickly calculated the scale of the disaster in my mind. To bring one zombie to life, it was necessary to spend 47 UMPs. To destroy it, 124 UMPs, universal magical points. I had about 1,500, but it was unknown where and when I would be able to replenish the reserve. Val spoke of 100 crossbowmen, but I could take on a maximum of 12. On the other hand, there were plenty of dead people in the quagmire, and an army of 30 afterlife recruits could briefly delay the enemy's army. I must admit, the enemy left me pitiful scraps. Most often the victim of the swamp were grandmothers with baskets, cows, and fugitive robbers. In addition, I did not really want to flood the surrounding area with living drowned people. The Code of Magicians prescribed that you should destroy your creations upon completion of their mission, and I was not sure that I had enough strength to clean up after myself. We went into a shameful flight. Leon, who led the retreat, peered intently at the barely noticeable intermittent strip of sedge. Volt reacted sensitively to the slightest movement of the reins and legs of the rider. Leon managed to send him to the left or right literally an inch. Chamomile and Sivka instinctively repeated the stallion's tricks. 10 minutes of fast riding was enough to break away from the zombies. They stopped shooting but did not give up the pursuit. Are they going to continue to follow us?" Val asked, rising in his stirrups and with a vigilant eye looking around the swamp spreading around us. The landscape was not inspiring. All the same hummocks, stumps, flying blueberry bushes. Well, flying. Empty blueberry bushes, moss, thin twigs of pine trees, and so on until the horizon. "I am afraid so." The zombies' habits were well known to me. At an introductory lecture on necromancy, I'll meet and amuse the audience with a true story about a certain magician who, on a call, went to an abandoned village 40 miles from his hometown and discovered there a lively, cheerful cemetery of resurrected dead. The magician, at least The magician finally called the cemetery to order, which greatly alienated the last unnoticed zombie, who crawled out of the grave after the sorcerer left. 2 weeks have passed, the magician has long forgotten about the completed task, when suddenly, on a dark night, he gets up to drink water, returns to bed, hugs his wife, and instead touches something cold, slimy, stinking. At the same moment, the wife made the counter gesture and, having received uh, something, to put it mildly, strange into her arms, raised a wild cry. The zombie, finding itself in the center of attention, was not at all embarrassed and tried to strangle the magician with one hand and his nervous wife with the other, but the unperturbed mage slammed the full chamber pot on its head and pierced the uninvited guest with his wife's curling iron. Almit, sighing, ended the story with the news that his wife left the magician the very next day, declaring that she refuses to live with a person who brings such work home, and believes that the words "until death do us part" could not be more appropriate to the dead in the marital bed. Leon laughed quietly, but a terrible thought came to my mind. If a zombie hunting for a magician attacked his wife, then what will happen to the village that lies on our way if the crossbowmen do not stop? The path deviated more and more to the left, and low, sparse bushes started to appear. Soon the purposeful dead disappeared from sight. If they were swordsmen or spearmen, we would attack them without hesitation. The half-rotten flesh could not even withstand a kick, let alone hardened steel. But this flesh still needs to be reached, which, you see, is quite difficult to do under a hail of bolts. To offer this to my companions was pure madness, so I didn't offer it. I imperceptibly pulled on the reins, and Chamomile began to walk and then stopped altogether, snoring pitifully. I patted her on the withers encouragingly and dismounted. The zombies had not yet crawled out from around the bend, and my companions had managed to get lost among the undergrowth. The edge of the swamp was just a stone's throw away. Reaching into my pocket, I scooped out a bunch of sunflower seeds and thoughtfully poured them from palm to palm. I wish I had a bag for good measure. I walked forward with small steps, scattering seeds along the path. It was enough for maybe 15 feet. Having critically admired the result, I climbed onto the horse and galloped forward, following the guys. To Chamomile's great displeasure, after 300 feet I again forced her to stop. She didn't like the zombies that appeared around the corner even more. They walked in silence, only the slurping of the swamp mud and the jingling of bolts in their quivers. Chamomile neighed imploringly, leaning forward with her whole body. Her owner is crazy. Can't she see who is chasing them? And it seems like she decided to do some magic on her back. Half turning, I focused on the road. A lush bush of yellow sage served as a guide for me. As I finished putting seeds near it. As soon as the first zombie reached the bush, I chanted the first line of the spell. 3 or 4 lightning bolts flashed over the swamp, and the wind bent down the grass. Side effect: an experienced magician will not move a leaf or an aspen. From the second line, the earth shook noticeably. The third made the water foam. The seeds began to stir, responding to my call. The black door swung open, spraying yellow-green blaze of sprouts. Mushrooms lift stones. The grass pushes the pavement slabs apart. The sunflower palisade rushed towards the sky in unison, tearing open the rotten flesh of the crossbowman. The sky and earth shook from a multi-voiced howl. The pointed, leafless stems pierced chests like spikes, tore apart joints, and knocked heads off shoulders. The rotten army fell to pieces like a house of cards, and huge yellow flowers bloomed majestically, one after another, over the pile of twitching bones. And then Chamomile decided that she has had enough of the horrors of practical magic. She neighed, reared up, throwing me to the ground, and galloped after Bot and Sivka. I felt unlikely on my side, but it didn't seem to hit anything too much. Quickly turning over onto my stomach and throwing out my hand after the fleeing mare, I shouted a few words in a broken voice. Instead of freezing in place, Chamomile darted to the side, straight into the black window of the mire. Desperate but useless sleep, the white mane swirled, the front hoofs touched the water. Numb with amazement, I watched as the frightened mare rushed across the water like the prophet of Suga along the sunken bridges. Precious seconds were lost. The surviving zombies, reloading their crossbows on the move, emerged from the sunflower thickets. There were not many of them, about 10 or 12. Some were missing one arm, others an ear, an eye, or their entire head, and it was unclear how they were going to aim without it. They were probably told in great detail. I waved my hand, and the arrow flying towards my forehead swung its feathers, deflecting to the side. I haven't yet been able to create solid shields against material objects. Against magic, yes, fire pulsar is easy to reflect, especially if it comes from the hands of an inexperienced adept or is generated by a protective amulet. Four more crossbows nodded. I backed away, not taking my eyes off the flying arrows. 3 passed over the left shoulder, 1 over the right. It turned out to be very inconvenient to retreat backwards under a hail of crossbow bolts, but it was not recommended to stand even more so. The zombies stretched out in a chain. 50 feet remained until the first one. Realizing that it was much easier to reflect arrows flying in a cluster, they switched to single shots. Now the arrows were whistling continuously. Worse, the shooters no longer tried to kill me with one shot in the chest or head, limiting themselves to scattered shooting at less vital parts of the body. This created additional difficulties. Instead of direct blocking, it was necessary to use lateral blocking, which is more energy intensive, and it is not so easy to instantly switch from the upper right block to the lower left one. An experienced magician, oh gods, when will I finally become one, could attack and defend at the same time, but this has not yet come to me. By concentrating on one spell, I completely exhausted my capabilities. And zombies did not. If all the soldiers of our army were as smart and efficient, the enemy would bypass the borders of Beloria on tiptoe. The crossbow in the hands of the first zombie was replaced by a sword. The other shooters pulled up to him, blindly staring in front of them and silently opening their rotten mouths. The shooting stopped. The crossbowmen reloaded their weapons, waiting. I had little choice, a sword or an arrow. If I deflect a sword, I will receive bolt, and if I deflect a bolt, one or the other. And they do not interfere with each other as well. I was already killed with a sword before. Veterans claim that there is no greater joy and honor for a warrior than to accept death in hand-to-hand combat, but this apparently is not an acquired taste. I personally did not like it. Death by arrow was even more alarming. The favorite execution of the forest thieves was by shooting, and these guys were never known for the mercy. I stopped and took a fighting position. Well, I have enough magic for a couple or two of the dead. Won't waste time on the swordsman. I'll let the crossbowman get closer and attack. Otherwise, they'll shoot before I finish with the first spell and start the second. Perhaps with this glorious but alas last deed, I will go down in legends, and this disastrous place will be called Boyhood's Jumps until the end of time. Ugh. Something whistled briefly from behind my back, and a long dagger stuck up to the hilt between the swordsman's empty eye sockets. The head was torn off the shoulders like a pot from a fence. Strings of mucus stretched from the vertebrae and exploded. This throw was made with such force that the knife, with its head torn off, flew another 40 feet and stuck into the trunk of an aspen tree. The headless dead staggered, took a step back, and confusedly waved his sword. Taking advantage of the moment, I planted him in the chest with the prescribed 124 UMPs. A solid column of flame soared to the heavens and fell, scattering in the wind like flakes of dust. Ljónstaden burst out of the forest like a black whirlwind. Arrows flew towards him. One stuck into Volt's butt, but the angry, squealing stallion didn't even break his stride. Flying through a hail of arrows like an ethereal spirit, the white-haired horseman burst into the crowd of undead like a crushing hurricane. Volt spun around. The long blade of the sword flashed and immediately dimmed, and scraps of clothing and rotten flesh flew towards us. It couldn't be called a battle. Lón mowed down the dead in a row like they were meadow grass. The ground became a mess of scurrying limbs. They bent, jumped convulsively, and crawled to the sides, clinging to the sedge bushes. The horse turned around and galloped back. Flying past, Lón bent down and picked me up with his free hand, throwing me onto the saddle behind him. The immediate threat has passed, but it was definitely not worth lingering in this literally damp swamp. You never know what other nasty thing will emerge from the quagmire. It was not so far from the significant massacre to the edge of the swamp. Volt flew the distance separating them in about 5 minutes. Having galloped another quarter of a mile, the vampire turned sharply to the right into a forest clearing, where, holding Sivka by the bridle, a noticeably alarmed troll was shifting from foot to foot. "Finally!" he burst out. "Did it work out?" "Yes!" I jumped to the ground and pulled my jacket down. "Are you sure?" Val asked skeptically. Lón swayed in the saddle and fell like a heap to the ground. My hands were covered in blood, up to the elbows. Lecture 14. Regenerology. Ay, oh my god. Sorry. Stuff full of. Both arrows lodged in the right lung. The shorter one pierced the vampire's body, and the bloody tip was visible between the fifth and sixth ribs. Another arrow pierced under the right wing and protruded from the back obliquely, apparently buried in the sternum from the inside. Val whistled, deftly cutting his bloody jacket with a knife. Huh, you're screwed. Come on, pull it out, Leon croaked, spitting blood. Oh, fuck this. Second jacket in a week. Sitting next to Leon, I supported him by the shoulders. I could hear the blood bubbling in the vampire's chest. Well, hold on. The troll carefully felt his back around the arrows and lightly tugged at the shafts. Where should we start? Which one is more annoying? Fuck you, Leon swore with all his might. The quagmire had pretty much corroded the aspen rods. Val easily broke the lower arrow at the very tail and pulled it out from the chest. Leon coughed, blood gushed from his mouth and nose. Give me some water, he asked chokedly. Won't it get worse? Where worse? At this moment, Val pulled the second arrow towards himself and then forcefully drove it into the wounded man's back from a different angle. Having broken through the flesh, the tip jumped out 2 fingers to the left of the sternum. A thin stream of dark blood snaked down the stomach. Leon didn't scream, just squeezed my wrist painfully, grinding his teeth. Well, that's all. Val pulled out the second arrow. Don't worry, chick. To kill this bastard you need to put in a lot more effort. Don't worry? I was shaken with fear. The wounds hardly bled, but Leon coughed without stopping. Everything was stained with blood, scarlet and dark brown. The further he went, the more difficult it was for him to breathe. The caked blood clogged the lungs and was coughed up in the form of black viscous clots. Leon was leaving heavier and heavier on me, shuddering convulsively with his whole body. I started to weave a spell, but the vampire shook his head negatively. Don't waste your energy, he whispered. Myself. Don't be afraid, I can handle it. Well, then you lie down and we need to go, the troll decided, getting up. Where? To Kasuti, where else? I'll hire a cart, he won't be lying around here forever. It's not... There's no need, Leon groaned. I'm fine. Almost. You shouldn't have come back, the troll spat. Well, they should have eaten this idiot, frolicked in the village and returned to Jump's to rot. Okay, why bother wagging your tongue in vain? You won't get up until the evening anyway, and the ground is damp. Maybe for some she's a mother, but for others it's a grave. We need to go to the village and look for a cart. You can get to Nizhny Kasuty if you ride on horseback in 20 minutes. I can go there and back in an hour. Get ready, chick. For what? Can't you do it alone? I'll stay with Leon, but what if... Exactly, said the troll. What if? So climb into the saddle without talking. I have a... Sivka is strong, he can carry 2. I'm not going anywhere. I won't leave Leon alone. And I won't leave you 2 together. Val was starting to get angry. Look at this crazy shgariba, putting her own head in a noose. Go with him, the vampire suddenly whispered, going completely limp and starting to slide off my shoulder. The lips turned wide and it was difficult to obey. The lips turned wide and didn't obey. Leave. No! I carefully lowered Leon to the ground, crumpled and tucked my jacket under his head. Val, he's really bad. What if he dies? He? Unlikely. The troll unceremoniously grabbed me by the collar and tried to pull me away from the vampire. Move away, I hissed, throwing out my right hand in a defensive gesture. A sharp, thin bolt of lightning struck the ground next to Val. The troll jumped back, shielding his face with his sleeve, and cursed dirtily. Well, you brewed herself, so you can eat it yourself, he threatened, leaning on the horse's withers and jumping into the saddle. I warned you. Val viciously stabbed Sivka with his heels. The poor gelding shook his head and trotted heavily along the forest path. The troll spurred him again, forcing the horse into a gallop. The forest quickly swallowed up the lone rider. The spruce trees whispered anxiously to each other, shaking their sharp tops. Gusts of wind sent icy tendrils under my jacket. I remember that among Volt's luggage there should be a blanket and some clothes, at least a spare shirt. Whatever vital forces lie hidden in the thin body of the white-haired vampire, resting on the damp and cold earth is unlikely to do him any good. Volt didn't seem to notice me. Raising his head, the horse looked at the patches of fog over the swamp. There was a caked black crust with streaks along the arrow, deeply embedded in the rump. Suddenly emboldened, I reached out my hand and stroked his wet neck. The horse glanced at me like a snake. After hesitating, he poked his muzzle into my shoulder and sighed heavily. I burst into tears, pressing myself to the horse's cheek. Volt stood obediently in a clearly uncomfortable position, lowering his head and allowing me to awkwardly play with his mane. After crying and giving the horse a grateful kiss on the forehead, Volt freed himself from my convulsive embrace with obvious relief. I calmed down a little, took my bag and blanket and gathered some firewood. There was no rain, but there was a fine misty haze in the air, and I had to make a lot of effort to light a fire. Leon showed no signs of life. I warmed some water in the pot and washed the blood of the back and the chest of the wounded man. Pink rivulets ran in all directions, not wanting to be absorbed into the hard ground that had begun to freeze. Having pricked my hands, I broke the green spruce boughs, spread a blanket over them, and, puffing with effort, dragged Leon to a more comfortable bed. The damp chamomile ran away along with all the luggage. Spare clothes, a third of provisions, and a blanket. Oh, how useful it would be now! Having picked up the hanging edges, I somehow wrapped Leon up and sat down next to him, placing his head on my lap. Almost immediately the vampire's body bent over in a spasm. Throwing off his blanket, the muscle tensed to the limit, just not breaking through the skin, and a strangled wheeze escaped from his mouth. The cramp passed as quickly as it came. Slowly settling down on the bed, Leon took a deep, wheezing breath and opened his eyes. Leon! I was delighted, leaning towards him. Leon, how are you? The wounded man did not answer. Dilated pupils looked mindlessly into the grey sky. The narrow edges of the irises shone yellow. Leon, are you okay? Instead of answering, Leon jerked his head around and glared at me with a terrible, inhuman gaze. It was as if the iron teeth of a trap were clenched on my wrist. "Leon, ow!" I squealed. Blood sprayed from under the vampire's nails. "Leon, let me go. Please." It was as if he had obeyed. The eyes slowly closed, the head fell to the side, the grip weakened. Hissing in pain, I pulled back the stiff fingers one by one. There were bruises on my wrists with the crescents of bleeding wounds. Hopelessness, sharp, terrible, overwhelmed me and carried me along with it, like the seesaw of drugs and empty shell along the sand. The carefree world of the little girl shattered into splintered fragments. A grown woman knelt next to her dying friend. Why did I even pick up this stupid bow? Why did I stop Leon from receiving the prize? Why did I return to the swamp? A chain of mistakes, the links of which are forged by my stupidity. If even one link disappears, the chain will fall apart. There won't be those gloomy clouds, chilling rain, bloodstains on the clothes, Leon's heavy head over my numbed knees. Disappear, please. I want to wake up. Shall I give you a belt? Leon inquired in a weak but rather cheerful voice. For what? The vampire's provocative question, as always, took me by surprise. Well, that depends on how far you go in thinking about the meaning of your worthless life. You can hang yourself with it, or limit yourself to self-flagellation. Can I strangle you with it? I asked hopefully. Listen, since you are not trying to kill the flesh, why are you killing the spirit? Volha, if my opinion means anything to you, then know that I am simply delighted with your action. I confess that I always believed that early mortality spoiled people, spoiled humans, strangling noble impulses in the bud. And all of them can only dream like, wow, they will put a ghoul to death with their bare hands. A werewolf will be bent into ram's horn. But in reality, if such a warrior sees a chimera or a scrawny basilisk, there will be no need for glory. They would hope to live in good health. You do exactly the opposite. Instead of being scared and running away when you see the monster, you rush at it, scaring your friends, and then remorse begins to torment you. That's original method of fighting universal evil. Well, the method is effective, I must admit, I got ruffled. So why are you upset then? What's done is done. Drop it and forget it. But how it was done? I bit my lip, holding back tears. To be honest, there is nothing to be proud of. Well, what do you want? The first pancake is always a mess. Leon tried to console me. Well, if it only the first. Once I wanted to make a pancake. Leon recalled, turning over with difficulty on his side. I'm afraid that didn't add to my authority. No, it didn't crumple up. It stuck. Deathly. And when I tried to turn it over on the fly, the frying pan came off the handle and broke the pot of sour cabbage soup. I furtively brushed away a tear. Well, that's a comparison, sure. Stop it. You destroyed an entire army of zombies, and that's the main thing. So, write them down in your credit, and let's move on to discussing future exploits. But if it weren't for you, I wonder why these goons disliked us so much. The vampire abruptly changed the subject. We're not Like, we're not pioneers. People have wandered to the jumps before us. Yeah, and they didn't wander out. And what about the herbalist and his student? They knew nothing about the pranks of the drowners, but the trail was well known to them, as were the local legends. This is a fresh legend, it's just been formed. In a bare place? Come on. You know yourself. Zombies are not rats. They won't come running from the neighboring cellars. Well, okay, you convinced me. They didn't like us. Out of the blue? Did they not like our faces or what? Okay, you wanted a complete answer, get it. Our faces, as you put it, didn't please some magician. He blew, spat, clapped his hands, and the unlucky crossbowmen left the quagmire to finish their earthly journey with supports for the earthly journey as supports for the oil seed crop. Satisfied? No, Vodka. This is a stupid question. If you didn't like my face wandering around the swamp, what would you do? I carefully examined Lorne from head to toe. Well, perhaps it's easy to imagine. I don't like you any more. A little more effort, and you will know what I will do to you. Come on, I'm serious. I thought. Well, I don't know. In general, the zombie option suits me, but I would have placed the bulk of them in front of us. Then the horses, unable to turn around, would have darted to the sides into the mire. Even if someone managed to dismount, they would be pinned in front and behind and shot with crossbows. Well, you are a born villain, Don grinned approvingly. Hence the conclusion. If our enemy is not a complete idiot, he would use your plan. But you see, we consider him an idiot only because he could not destroy us. Maybe he didn't intend to do this. What then? Intimidate for us to come back? Excluded. It was necessary to scare us before the swamp. It is clear as day that once we set foot on the path, we will not be able to turn back, no matter how much we would like to. Are you saying they were pushing us forward? Looks like it. They were afraid that we would not make it on time. For what? If I had known, then I think I would not have rushed. Nah, just look at this funeral cortege. Leaving the tired Sivka in the care of the boy, coaxed with a small coin, the troll returned on the cart, accompanied by the owner of a small but nimble horse harnessed to it. A light red foal and two dogs ran next to the horse, and at the end of the procession was a leaky pot dragged behind the cart on a rope. Oh, look at those jokers! The villager shook his head in bewilderment, lifting the pot and scratching the top of his head. He didn't pay the slightest mind to Leon and me, even when we climbed onto the cart and the vampire stretched out on an armful of straw with a groan. Volt was tied to the back railing of the cart. The superiority of the black stallion over the nimble horse was so obvious that if he wanted, he could drag the cart in the opposite direction. But the black beast behaved obediently, and half an hour later we triumphantly entered the village. We will make a short break here before returning to the next chapter. Okay, I am back and we are here with another chapter of Val pretending he doesn't care and he doesn't have friends and he's a lone wolf. Lecture 15, Divination. The village of Nizhny Kasuty was safe from floods on the only hill in the entire area. 7 or 8 thin birch trees on the bare autumn black slopes seemed like grey hairs around a giant pimple. The ringing rooster call could be heard far away. The most remarkable thing in the village of Nizhny Kasuty was its palisade of thick, sharpened aspen stakes in 3 rows, arranged with stones and intertwined with bast, so high that from behind it the tops of old linden trees and the spire of a bell were barely visible. A spire of a bell tower. On the tips of the stakes, torn bast shoes, cracked jugs and pots, interspersed with a dozen pig skulls bleached by the sun, peacefully swayed and twirled. In the strong wind, skulls and pots knocked against each other as if calling for the table. The gates, which were wide open during the day, were reinforced with iron brackets and closed with a huge steel beam, weighing no less than a pound. I think it's a different pound from American pound. I am sorry for interruption. I'm going to Google it. I am absolutely good. Okay, how about we change them? Yeah, that's 36 pounds. Apologies, it was some educational moment happening. So, okay, where is it? I lost place. Yeah, so steel beam weighing no less than a. How many I said? 36 pounds. How much it is in kilograms? 16 something kilograms. That's a lot. I'm sorry for interruption, it is very hot. My brain is not the brain. Okay. Along the inner perimeter of the palisade, every 6 feet, I guess, there were small ladders under which rose piles of heavy cobblestones. Hey, who are we fighting with? I nodded towards the defensive arsenal. The driver scratched his bald spot and shrugged. Well, not like we're fighting, we're more like joking. Our neighbors, gods forbid, are hairy non-humans. There's their underground city, you know? The driver pointed his whip to the west. I peered for a long time in the indicated direction, but saw nothing but high piles of earth. Individually, they are not very scary. They don't get into fights, they even help. Like they'll plow the field, bring in coal or like semi-precious stones for exchange. But only from time to time, something gets into their head. The whole gang gathers and, well, they try to raid the village. You know, punch the guys in the faces, pull up women's skirts, drink beer and the innkeepers for free. Like, they'll have fun to their heart's content, and by morning they'll run back to their holes. Well, we decided to stop this disgrace. got a wall, put guards on duty at night to watch out for something sneaking somewhere. And the guards, if they spot someone, call the others so that they too, can stretch their hands. What if they sneak up from below through the underground passage? I asked. The man laughed meaningfully and threatened someone invisible with a whip. Nah, our hill has not just popped out of the ground, but it stands on a stone base, which is why there are a great many stones in our fields. No matter how much you pick them out in a spring, the amount does not decrease. I remember I was still a kid, the non-humans dug a hole right under the hill, began to gouge the soil from underneath. The entire hill shook, and there was such a noise and ringing that the milk of the like milk of the first cows burned out. Well, our guys jumped out of the gate and gave those diggers what they deserved, so that they knew who they were dealing with. And then you celebrated the victory with a riotous feast at which both the winners and the vanquished got completely drunk. Leon said mournfully without opening his eyes. What's the problem? The man seemed offended. Why don't drink beer with the diggers? It's no good for me to quarrel with them at all. Then who will buy my turnips and potatoes? An overseas merchant would never give such a price at these non-humans. That's for me, the troll bared his teeth carnivorously. A fight is a fight, but booze is booze, no offense. How do you know, good sir? The driver turned to Leon. Have you ever been to our area? Sort of, the vampire answered laconically. Do you have an inn? I asked. No. Does anyone allow visitors to stay overnight? It's unlikely, it's a holiday today. Almost everyone's in-laws came to visit. So what should we do? I was confused. So go around and ask around, the man answered indifferently, unharnessing the horse. If you won't spend the night in the cart, doesn't matter to me. He paused and added, one moment. Yeah. He paused and added, it's not mine anyway. Whose? Dog knows. You said it was urgent. Well, I didn't ask anyone. If someone else tell me that you find it outside the gate, I take it there. I took it there. And with these words, the driver left, accompanied by the old foal and dogs. It seemed like no one was looking for the cart, and Leon had already dozed off, so I didn't want to disturb him. If we don't find something better, we'll spend the night on the cart, Val and I decided, and went our separate ways. Before lunch, I managed to walk around the village, find a good source of magical power and use it. For a symbolic fee, expel a small demon from a cellar, small imp from a cellar with potatoes, and talk with the locals, which did not yield anything. The entire adult population of the village was in bed after the daring walks. What? The entire adult population of the village was massively hangover after the grand celebration of Baboznik. Apparently, the festival began with the Harvest Festival, and the philosophically minded residents of the Nizhny Kosut intended to drag it out until the new year, and then it would be a stone's throw to the Vesnachuhi. Angry, rumpled, sleepy residents unanimously sent me to the demon, Leshy, Kuska's mother, the undying and elder mysterious folklore element. The undying. Oh, Kashet and undying, okay. And elder, mysterious folklore element. During questioning, it turned out that the elder in the village is called the headman and was last seen in a puddle under the pigsty. I visited the puddle, but did not find the elder, although the boar basking there was very much fit the description of the elder, hefty, bold, and big-nosed. The village was quiet and calm. The cold wind crashed over the fence, not reaching the huts. The well-fed dogs dozed, holding the gnawed bones with their paws. From a ravine under the hill, the black smoke of a moonshine still rose to the heavens. Val also did not succeed in finding housing, but didn't lose heart. I like this village, said the troll. Hey, I am I'll settle on it when I get tired of wandering around the highways. I'll save some money, build a house, have a wife and kids. Come on, chick, shut your mouth, I'm joking. What's good about it? There is not even a tavern, but and they kicking you out of everywhere. They kick you out until the hangover goes away. You will see how kind and affectionate they will become in the evening. An experienced woman knows when to approach a man. And it's now you are a fidgety little girl for them, but in the dark and with meat you will pass for a woman for a sweet soul. Well, you know what? Go approach them yourself. In the dark and under meat, even this will do. I stretched out on the straw next to Leon and was going to take a nap for an hour or two. But then a supposedly exercised imp appeared and demanded half of the fee. Before I had time to put my hand in my pocket, Val showed his fist to the imp. The evil spirit swallowed convulsively and disappeared. The disappearance of a demon was a good sign. Almost immediately, a grimy boy in his father's shirt, along to his toes, with rolled-up sleeves, ran up to us and reported the location of the headman. Moreover, the headman invited us to his place for lunch. Leon woke up. Yawning and stretching, he asked what the headman needed. The boy didn't notice, but timidly added that the headman's head is pounding, which is why he is very angry and mean about everything. All the more reasons to go, said Val. Or else we will miss the moment when the headman begins to drink. Begins to drink again. I shrugged. Let's go, of course. We need to ask him about the Voldogs. Has anything unusual happened in the camp over the past couple of months? How does he know? Well, neighbors after all. Leon jumped off the cart, easily jumping over its edges. It seemed that his former strength and agility had returned to him, but the natural pallor of his face had not been replaced by a healthy blush. He looked more like a vampire than ever. come on, we'll figure out what and who to ask on the spot. On the porch of the hut indicated to us two black and white cats were dozing, touchingly embracing. Seeing us going up the steps, the cats began to fuss, purred hoarsely, and, slipping between our legs, were the first to scurry into the house. Passing through the cold entryway lined with jugs and hung with stretched rabbit skins, I opened the second door. Behind it was a kitchen, one half of which was occupied by a huge brick oven, and the other by an equally impressive table. There was no one in the kitchen. One and then the second cat jumped up on the table and began sniffing the empty dishes. I paused in a doorway and then tried to enter, pushing me aside, but I blocked the entrance with my leg bent at the knee. For your information, I said morally without removing my leg. Before, men used to let women go ahead, or even better, carry them into the house in their arms. And they certainly didn't push. I'll take it into account, Lon promised, picking me up in his arms. Hey, let me go, I was joking. But Lon wasn't done yet. Ignoring the fierce resistance, he threw me over his shoulder, belly down. And even earlier, he continued calmly, holding my kicking legs with one hand. Women were carried into the cave this way, having previously been hit on the head with a club. This is where this tradition came from. Well, that's enough, let go, I give up. At the noise, a grandma looked out from behind the colorful curtain that apparently covered the door to the room. She narrowed her eyes and broke into a wrinkled smile. Oh, newlyweds, she stated, leaning on her stick. I wish I were your age. Well, are you done? Got married? I asked, resigned and hanging upside down. Lon, shuddering, unclenched his arms and stared at the grandma in disbelief. But I fell like a heap to the floor. You asshole, I exhaled. At least you could have warned me that you were dropping me. The grandma, groaning and holding her hand on her lower back, tied with a grey shawl, walked up to the stove and disappeared. Dissolved like salt in water. Guys, Lon said distantly, look, is there a third arrow sticking out of my head? That's a weird grandma. Or a stove, suggested Val, slapping his hand on the brickwork. No, the stove seems normal. And I thought there was something wrong with me, Lon admitted with a nervous laugh. I look at her and I don't feel anything, like I've forgotten how to read minds. Well, ghosts are thoughts. Someone thinks about them and here they are. If you see this old woman again, cross yourself and say a prayer. The vampire just sighed. Taking a step forward, Val jerked the curtains aside. There was no door behind them, but there was a mortar, a poker, a broom, and 2 grips. Well, here with this house, ghosts roam around in the broad daylight. What's going on here at night? Well, now we know why the headman needed us. Lon spread his hands. Does he exist? The headman existed. Just at that moment he appeared on the threshold of the door to the room, stocky, puffy, sleepy, in saggy pants and a long undershirt. Well, hello, dear guests, he yawned, rubbing his eyes. The headman had a long, drooping moustache, which gave him a sad look, and a surprisingly picturesque bald head, shining like a ripe apple. We, I must admit, stared at him like sheep at a new gate. Val, the most suspicious and impudent one, reached out his hand and felt the hem of the old man's shirt. No, it's not Grandma, he sniffed disappointedly. What Grandma? The headman did not understand. Oh, wait, Grandma. Yeah, Grandma ordered to leave a long time back, last year. She was a famous matchmaker, married almost the whole village. On the eve of Baboshnik, the girls ran to her to tell fortunes on hair, pancakes, combs, mouse droppings, crushed cockroaches, and other abominations. Truly, they say, foolish woman, only she can discern the features of a betrothed in a crushed cockroach. And if the cockroach is still moving its legs and whiskers, that's better. It means that the matchmakers are about to arrive at the yard. My sister used this method to kill all the cockroach in the house. She would slam her bath shoe and look closely, looking for familiar features. And then at breakfast, on a rag, she shows what a noble groom had appeared to her. Nasty, in a word, not fortune teller. Well, she still walks around as a maiden. Who needs such a fool? We saw your grandma over there in the stove, the troll blurted out foolishly. The headman just shrugged his shoulders. Yes, I know, I know. She always appears and greets guests. Don't pay any attention. Let her seep in wherever she needs to. She can't do anything, only scare if you're out of habit. Are you used to it? I asked. The headman waved his hand vaguely and changed the subject. You sit down. Let's talk. Travelers haven't visited us for a long time. There is no one to tell us what's going on in this world. We're soon gonna go completely wild out here. Others even have their in-laws come for the holidays, but all my relatives I have, my sister Mashka and my daughter Braska, the only child from my deceased wife. Where did she go, by the way? She ran out to the well for a minute and, well, disappeared. With conversation, the headman quickly and skillfully set the table. A blissful smile spread across Val's face like an oil blot on water. A cast iron pot with stewed chicken, baked potatoes, and smoked sausage came out of the oven on its horns. Bowls of sauerkraut, mushrooms, cucumbers, and pickled apples, as well as a jug of brine, rose from the cellar. Onions, being cut into quarters, rustled, salt creaked as it was scraped off a thick piece of lard, and the pock-marked and ugly elder sister began to bustle around, placing plates and mugs on the table. And the ultimate dream, a huge, cold and foggy bottle of cloudy moonshine, came into the light of day from a secluded nook. The door swung open and a girl of about 12 burst into the room like a bright whirlwind, wearing brand new boots and a squirrel fur coat, a colorful silk scarf on her head, a dark brown braid to the waist, her cheeks flushed from the cold. The bucket slammed loudly, splashing water, and, not paying attention to the guests, she began babbling from the threshold. Daddy, what do I know? The girls at the well said that a wolf tore up Adam's Yelemi's cow. right in the middle of the day, jumped into the barn and torn everything clean to shreds. Like, here's the cross, I'm not lying. Yelemy was sleeping and his wife heard that the cow was roaring and pushed him on his side, and she woke up him forcibly because he was drunk from evening. By the time he reached the barn, the cow fell silent and he turned back, and his wife hit him with a rolling pin and sent to look out again because she was scared. Jeremy grumbled and grumbled but went and opened the door, and there was a wolf, like hefty, the size of a baby cow. How he, and then he growled at Jeremy and it started grinding its teeth, and he sat down and the wolf jumped over him and ran away, white as milk, and whole face was bloody. I felt frozen to the bench. Cold goosebumps ran down my back. Tore to shreds. I heard a dull wolf growl chilling my blood as if I saw with my own eyes the animal horror in the cow's eyes. A jump, splashes of blood on the walls, and a huge beast devouring alive a victim that was convulsing. A vision flashed before my eyes and disappeared. Leon pinched off a crust of bread and put it in his mouth as if nothing had happened. Val looked intently at his torn sleeve. Well, yeah, what color a fever, such a wolf, the headman grumbled dissatisfiedly. You've found someone to listen to. Yeneme is always spreading gossip. Either the imp stole his ham from the pantry, or Leshy led him through the forest for 3 days until the moonshine ran out. Now the white wolf size of a baby cow. It's sickening to listen to. You'd better greeted the guests. They had come such a long way from Starman itself. Hi, the girl blurted out loudly, unbuttoning her fur coat and sitting down on the edge of the bench. Dad, can I have some sausages? Take it, fidget, whatever you want. And you, visitor, and you, my darling guest, would be a merchant? The headman uncorked the bottle with a loud clap and filled the cups. A merchant, John agreed without hesitation. Interested in pebbles. Well, that's what I thought. Merchants had always hired trolls or sorcerers to guard them, and you have the complete set. It is right, robbers are very greedy for lonely merchants, but it's unlikely that you'll profit from anything now. Before you, 6 people have already left empty-handed. Diggers don't sell right now. They don't even want to talk to merchants. There are no stones, and that's it. The lion, damn on humans, they have a lot of stones. The mines are working, I saw it myself when I was transporting barley for sale. I guess they want to raise prices. But you go anyway, try it. Maybe they already became better. Definitely, John promised. As soon as it gets dark, we'll go. The headman nodded his head approvingly and reached for a pickled cucumber, tightly clutching the empty goblet in his other hand. Well, what do you hear there in the capital city? Yeah, just a little, Val shrugged. Just recently we had a strange incident at our shooting ranges, almost like with your Yelemi. The troll told it well, juicily without mincing words, which gave the story a special lifelike flavor. The elder sister groaned and covered her face with her apron in the most terrible places. Bariska was listened with her mouth open. As soon as the troll fell silent, she jumped up and, grabbing her fur coat, flew out into the yard, hurrying to tell the story to her friends. Mashko did not have time to fill the cups. The headman's nose and cheeks became red, Val only perked up a bit, and the alcohol had no visible effect on Leon. I had already eaten my fill, and leaning back in my chair, absent-mindedly listened to the conversation. From time to time, Grandma appeared, now passing through the door with a milk pan in her hand, or with the crone stirring some rags on the stove. Soon, through the machinations of the playful Braiska, the news spread throughout the village that matchmakers had come to Mashka to marry her to the cockroach king, and Mashka agreed, but her brother did not, because he is greedy for the dowry. The house was surrounded by curious youngsters laughing under the windows. After repeated attempts, a dead crow was thrown into the chimney. An incredible stench arose, and black smoke from a burning feather wafted from the open stove. The headman, cursing, ran out into the street with a poker at the ready, but the pranksters ran in different directions, squealing and laughing. The crow was removed from the oven, the hut was ventilated, and the feast continued. Having satisfied the eldest curiosity regarding the capital's rutabaga prices, the size of the duty on import of sables and martens from Volmania, the heroic death of a certain Rinda Tupalski war with dwarfs, an unverified rumor, the old harvest and the carp catch, we managed to tactfully turn the conversation to the Waldocks. Totally insolent, the fairly tipsy headman complained about the Waldocks. Before, this and that, but now they've completely lost their shape. When their new boss showed up, they became completely insolent. Mashka, put it up. For this, for you and me, and Leshy with them. What am I talking about? Oh yeah, that's a good one. About the diggers. So, yesterday, the Judy Jens came to my yard. Come on, they say, what's her name? A girl, like, maiden, and make her more beautiful and, like, curvy, otherwise it will be bad. Well, it became bad for them. We threw him out, that is, like, right through the fence, over the fence, so they wouldn't look at our women. Why would they need a girl for? Can't imagine. Like, they threatened and threatened, but they didn't do anything, just left empty-handed. Diggers, in a word. Mashka, put it. Otherwise, by gods, I will give you to the miners. To the diggers. I thoughtfully twirled the spoon in my fingers, reflecting on the words of the headman, and the cockroach running across the cleanly swept floor immediately attracted my attention. And how did he escape the watchful eye of the headman's sister? When the cockroach stopped at my foot, cheekily probing it with its red whiskers, I couldn't stand it. Wham! Dropping my spoon, I bent down. I wonder where to look, at the floor or at the part of the cockroach that is stuck to the sole. The second spoon fell to the floor. Apologizing, Leon lifted the tablecloth. Well, he asked in a conspiratorial whisper, Who does he look like? Oh, you crushed him good, poor fellow, he doesn't even move. Listen, don't you think that this fine morning we disrupted the campaign to intimidate the people of Nizhny Kasuta? Seems so. Turns out that someone called upon the drowned crossbowmen to raid the rebellious village. And I consoled myself with the thought that the dead army was thrown into battle with me. Well, he definitely looks like a headman, Leon said seriously, pointing at the cockroach blob with the toe of his boot. The mustache is exactly like his. Begone, you fiend! I picked up both spoons and emerged from under the table. Oh horror! After Leon's words, the headman seemed to me an exact copy of the cockroach. Our host's speech became more and more inarticulate, until it was interrupted by a delicious squelch. The elder blissfully buried his nose in a bowl of leftover sauerkraut. Mashka deftly cleared the table and prepared beds. For me, on the bench by the stove, for the men in the room. Fairly believing that not a single Waldock will appear in the village before dark, we decided to rest before the decisive throw, before the decisive move, and happily stretched out on clean linen. And this is where we will finish for today. Thank you very much and see you later.